And there's nothing normal. I'll just say it like that. There's nothing normal about how this U.S. administration does things in the traditional sense. Um, Still, I think it's better than nothing because it does, at least the U.S. is now going to sell weapons to Ukraine. But the amount of money that we're talking about in the great scheme of things is not that significant. I mean, it means a dozen Patriot interceptors, for example. I mean, that's it. Again, better than nothing. But I think I don't know that this represents a major turning point that the Trump administration is prepared to now go all in with Ukraine. Certainly, it will be a very long time before there's any I would think a significant gain from whatever extraction is going to be done from the mining. And I don't think that having a U.S. company out there mining is going to be a real deterrent to Russia launching missiles against Ukrainians in that area. Um, having said that, um, I think that the Russians can't be too happy about this because I think that they probably thought that they had the U.S. administration all wrapped up, sewn up, and now they probably have to be recalculating. I mean, what the Trump administration was pushing, which does not mean that Ukraine would have accepted it or that Europe would have gone along with it. But what the Trump administration seems to have been pushing would have been a pretty damn good deal for the Russian side, more than they could have reasonably, certainly more than they would have gotten from the last administration. And I'm glad that Russia didn't take it because I think some of the things that the Trump administration was pushing were egregious. Um, but I have always sort of hoped that because President Trump is very transactional in how he approaches things, that in a way that sort of gives him the flexibility to do hard left turn or hard right turn or a complete about face. If he's not getting what he wants, then okay, screw you, and then completely change. And so I had hoped that the Russians at some point would annoy him so much because they were making the president look foolish. He obviously was not going to solve this in 24 hours or even 3 months. And so the president has a lot of leverage over the Russians that he didn't before. He could open the floodgates on aid, no restrictions, quantities, you name it. And the Congress, I think most of the Congress would certainly support that. Or he could do things that would crush Russia's oil and gas industry by working with allies to shut down Russia's ability to export oil and gas with their so-called shadow fleet through the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea. And of course, he could do things working with Saudis and others to manipulate the prices that would bring it down so low that it would wreck Russia. So he had leverage, and maybe he's at the point now where he's going to use it. The idea of Russia as an ally, and you put your finger on it very well. Russia did nothing to help Armenia when they were getting mauled by the Azeris. They did nothing to save Assad except offer him an apartment in Moscow. And now they've turned out they didn't do anything to help Iran. And that's either because um, they don't have anything they could do because they're so um, stretched fighting against Ukraine. So it's not like they had something they could send to help. When you look at the people that President Trump has around him now, none of them would ever say, Mr. President, that's illegal, or we can't do that. Especially, and I'm talking about the Secretary of Defense or the chiefs of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. They won't do that. And so I imagine that there is significant pressure on the people in uniform. I mean, just go back to this fiasco after the very impressive and effective raid that the strike that we launched against the nuclear program of Iran. I mean, incredible what the Air Force was able to do as part of a joint force with Navy help and all the others. It was huge. Um, But then the president was so quick to say we obliterated it. And then his Secretary of Defense, who was only there because he's 100% loyal, said yes. And then he attacked the press for saying, well, wait a minute. But the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, of course, he said, well, BDA, battlefield battle damage assessment, takes a long time. So yes, we hit it, but so a much more professional, sober approach. I can only imagine that he would have been said, hey, you need to get with the program and understand that this is about more than just whether or not they took them out. And so, um, but of course, our tradition and the oath these officers took to support and defend the Constitution, they're never going, and they should not publicly push back or mispresent. That's illegal. They should be doing it behind doors, but publicly they should not be doing that. What I'm most disappointed in is the retired four stars that are saying nothing. Only a handful: Admiral McCraven, General McChrystal, Admiral Stavridis, General Wesley Clark, and General Barry McCaffrey. Those are the only five four stars that I have seen publicly criticize the administration for the deployment of Marines into Los Angeles, the way they're using the National Guard, all these other things that are inappropriate, if not illegal. And the other four stars, the silence is deafening. And I think this is unfortunate because they need to take the pressure off of the guys in uniform. There's been too much self-doubt, too much, oh, we can't, negative. Russia's too big, and nations don't want to have to worry about facing Russia on their own. At the same time, there's a reason that London has always been referred to as the Londongrad Oblast because there is so much incredible Russian wealth there. There's here in Germany, the Russians have so much influence financially and through business means all over Europe. In Greece, these tankers, you have Greek ship owners that are making huge amounts of money because of this export of Russian oil. So until we get serious about it, and I wish the United States was more forward leaning into this with real decisiveness, we're not. So this is where Europeans are going to have to decide, um, okay, if Ukraine capitulates or is finally exhausted or whatever, the risk for Europe only goes up. It only gets worse. And more important than 5% is put money into helping Ukraine defeat Russia. That would be the best possible investment Europe could ever make in its own security. If you help Ukraine defeat Russia, that completes the isolation of Iran. And then China would say, well, okay, the West is serious. They have political will, they have capability. So it would also help deter China from making bad decisions. But the Chinese have got to be watching what's going on now, thinking, okay, there's not this unity of effort and political will, especially since everybody wants Chinese markets and everybody depends on China for so much. I think it's ludicrous that somebody would think it's not a legitimate target. I mean, just like a factory that makes weapons is a target. So of course, if you've got a large number of Russian troops that are out there in broad daylight that are parading with captured Ukrainian vehicles, they're celebrating whatever they think they accomplished against Ukraine. Of course, that's a target. And it's interesting, some of the comments I just read this morning where Medvedev said that, oh, we can't guarantee the safety of Kiev if the Ukrainians attack our parade. I mean, that's almost comical, as if they could or even would try to guarantee the safety of Kiev. And then President Putin, I think, said, I hope we don't have to use a nuclear weapon. I mean, this is classic Russian, putting those ideas out there to try and intimidate. But it looks like, based on reports I've seen, that several of the high-level leaders who were planning to show up are coming down with various illnesses or travel conflicts and have decided they don't want to be there in anticipation that there will be Ukrainian drones, either with explosives or blue and gold smoke or various other things that will be humiliating for the Russians. And I think this is where a real war leader would be doing things focused on winning the war, not holding a big stupid parade like this. Um, Obviously, I guess President Putin feels this is a way to keep the spirits of his own population built up. But if I was advising President Zelensky, I would launch hundreds of drones of all types, and some of them will get through.
Before we move on to the next question, I'd like to make a personal recommendation that I know you will appreciate. You may have seen my interview last week with the producer of the film series Kyiv of Mine, Ronnie Apteker. Well, I've partnered with them to help raise awareness of what I believe is an important series of films made for a Western audience to help break through absurd stereotypes about Ukraine, some of which, of course, are amplified by Russian propaganda. You can watch these films for free now. Details in a second. Kiev of Mine is a documentary series about Ukraine's extraordinary capital, which I had the privilege to visit for the first time in January this year. The film production began in 2018, and of course, much has changed since then. It's now 2025, and the story is far from over. Kyiv of Mine is a fast paced, beautifully filmed, humorous, fun, insightful, heartbreaking, moving, and hopeful work. The very antithesis, in fact, of a doom-laden and worthy wartime documentary. This is a work that is extraordinarily uplifting. My friend Operator Starsky says the film is made with so much love. The film series will make you laugh and cry. It's the only film about Ukraine that began before the war yet has traced lives through the tumultuous times, and which follows the lives of more than a dozen Ukrainians in real time. This is an historic period told through highly personal and emotive stories from Kiev's days of emerging prosperity after the Maidan Revolution through COVID and the full-scale invasion. This film is a breath of fresh air. Ukraine deserves a better conversation in the world, one that isn't centered around war, says Julian Ellis, filmmaker on Kyiv of Mine. It's hard not to argue with that, and the filmmakers have fully delivered on this promise. This is essential watching for anyone who calls themselves pro-Ukrainian, but I think it's also vital to get friends, colleagues, and family to watch it too, because the reality is few people have a vivid impression of Ukraine or any direct connection with its people. War is inhumane and abstract. Building an alternative perception is essential for engaging the world with the importance of Ukraine's struggle.
Well, the U.S. Army and the British Army and most of our NATO allies uh, have adopted a mission command type approach to tactical leadership. So, or, from the old German Auftragstaktik, where, the purpose is what's most important, and then the local commander figures out how, versus the large centralized, everybody has to go this way. I don't want to try to oversell that, but I mean that is kind of the expectation, that not that sergeants sit around and debate whether or not they're going to do what the captain said, but that the best officers are the ones that encourage the input, especially from the old wiser sergeants that have some experience. That is a significant departure for Ukrainian military, because 3, 4, 5 years ago, all of their senior officers would have been men who had been raised in the Soviet style in the schools, et cetera. And what happens, of course, in the crucible of conflict, that's where the better, more effective leaders emerge. And now Ambassador Zaluzhny, but when he was General Zaluzhny, that's what he was trying to do across the army, was to root out the old Soviet types, and to bring in or promote the young guys who had demonstrated this kind of approach that you're describing. And of course, when you think about the population of Ukrainian men that and women that are coming into the military now, most of them are young enough that they would have grown up post-Soviet, and been educated, exposed to the West, and so they're not as likely to just, be that fodder. So, every commander wants to have the initiative. And this has impressed me since Ukraine's attack into Kursk last year, that they could recognize that Russia did not have the ability to really break through and overrun their defenses way out in the Pokrovsk region, even though it was a terrible situation if you're a company commander there. The fact is, at the operational level, they could see that the Russians were not going to be able to break through. There is no big exploitation force that could then race to the Dnieper and keep going. So they were then able to marshal the forces and launch this attack to get the initiative, to change the narrative, to draw away Russian troops, to create strategic problem also for the Kremlin, which they have done. And I think that they can see that Russia does not have the ability to still breakthrough at the operational level. There will be local penetrations, of course, but the ability to really the mobile forces on this battlefield, I don't think they exist, and the Russians have not demonstrated the ability to conduct large scale combined arms operations, with air power, integrating drones, artillery, and maneuver. I just don't think they have the capabilities to do that. So for Ukraine, being able to stretch it out exactly as you described makes enormous good sense from their side. It also reveals to me or illustrates that they have made significant improvements in their personnel system, that in what we would call the institutional army, the ability to recruit, train, outfit, and then provide forces to the operational force. If they're able to keep doing that sort of thing, what you just described, that means they're in a better place than maybe what we thought 8, 9, 10 months ago. Yeah, I think this use of the term hybrid actually makes it difficult for leaders to be decisive and to explain to their populations why we have to do certain things. Because if it's hybrid, that somehow seems not as threatening or a little bit fuzzy versus, pure kinetic conflict. Whereas I don't think that the Russians, and here I would defer to you, but I don't believe that the Russians actually think of war or not war, but instead it's always somewhere on that spectrum doing different things. And so people like President Stubb of Finland, he's not confused about what the Russians are doing in the Baltic Sea. I think most of our allies, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they're not confused about what's happening. But maybe in UK and France and Germany, Netherlands, they're not as determined yet. So it's probably going to take a tragedy or some other catastrophic event to people to really snap out of it and realize that the Russians are actually trying to undermine everything that we all care about, or we say that we care about. This is not just about Ukraine or maybe Moldova or Georgia or something like that. Now, I do believe I I'm partial to Germany because I live here and I watch closely, and I've been frustrated for years that our German allies don't do more. But there's a new government that's going to be in place here in the next few days, led by Friedrich Merz. So a CDU, CSU, SPD government, and if he does the things he has talked about doing over the last few months, I think we're going to see a much more forward-leaning Germany that has kind of been what's missing. UK and France have been more forward-leaning than I had expected, but still, that's not enough. To get Germany with its economic power and its population and its geography and the amount of money that they are now starting to put into the Bundeswehr, for example, um, I think this could be a difference maker. Now, I'm prepared to be disappointed here, but my sense with Germans that I speak to in different walks of life, they know that they have to. They don't want to be the leader. They don't want to say we're the leader, but I have encouraged them, lead by example, just do. Just like the real leader on a football club is usually not the loudest guy, it's the one who always delivers. And I think that's a role for Germany here. The unlikelihood of a large scale formation and type attack as we saw in February 22, but instead something that clearly is an armed attack against NATO countries involving missile and air and missile strikes against seaports, that transportation infrastructure, unmistakable, but intended to see, will the alliance actually respond? And if they don't, particularly the US, but if we don't, then I think the credibility of the alliance would be severely damaged. They see no positive outcome accepting any bad deal that was brokered by the Trump administration. I think they do get some hope from European countries beginning to show some more strategic spine and their own capabilities. I mean, what you have seen firsthand, their ability to produce is increasing while they are at war. So it seems to me that they are in a place psychologically as well as physically that they're going to keep doing this because they can see that the other side is staggering and that the Russians depend almost completely on Iran and China. And so none of this is happening in a vacuum.
Бажаємо міцного здоров'я. Ми бійці батальйону безпілотних систем Black Raven 93-ї бригади Холодний Яр виконуємо бойове завдання на Константинівському напрямку в Донецькій області. Для їх успішного виконання наш підрозділ має потребу в пікапах для виїзду особового складу на позиції, евакуації, своєчасного підвозу боєприпасів, дронів та обладнання в район ведення бойових дій. Звертаємося до YouTube-спільноти Silicon Curtain та Джонатана особисто з проханням допомогти підтримати збір, а також до Car for Ukraine та Бандера Мобіль з проханням допомогти з купівлею, підготовкою та доставкою авто на фронт. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
I don't know if it's desperation. Clearly, the president would like to get this done. I think he has three sort of overarching strategic priorities in his mind in regards to this particular situation. Number one, stop the fighting. Stand fast my own personal political beliefs or whatever, and disagreements I might have with that administration. I take him sincerely at this, that he really does. And he has a record of being against wars, long wars, unnecessary wars. And so I think he genuinely wants to stop that fighting. The second sort of main theme from him is to prevent a resumption of the conflict. So based on things I hear him say and people around him say, he's not so desperate to get a deal that he won't care about what happens afterwards. Now, everything I'm telling you, I could be proven wrong in a week. I know that. But this is what it feels like after the last 4 days of saturation bombing at the Munich Security Conference. And then the third theme is burden sharing. Like every American president, he's going to expect allies to do more. And, I'm sick and tired of hearing Europeans talk about, oh, we got to do more, we got to step up, but actually no discernible change in the sense of urgency. Whether we're talking about the British Strategic Defense Review, Germany's hiding behind their no debt break laws, and other nations that have reasons that are excuses for not doing more. The vast majority of ammunition that's produced in Europe goes to customers in the Middle East and Africa. So don't tell me that we don't have ammunition to provide to Ukraine. The Czech Republic just delivered 1.5 million rounds. That's the Czech Republic. So there's a lot more that can be done, and I think President Trump is going to drop the hammer on nations that don't do this. I think there are people in every one of the relevant countries that are clear-eyed about who and what Russia is, that they're not confused about who the bad guy is here, and that even General Kellogg, you may remember a few weeks ago, General Kellogg, the president's envoy to Ukraine, said publicly Russia cannot be trusted. So that's a great starting point for any negotiations, is to acknowledge that the other side cannot be trusted. And Russia certainly has done zero to indicate anything publicly that they're interested in legitimate sort of discussions, unless it leads directly to them getting everything that they want. So this is where we have to. I'm trying to discern, is for the Trump team, are they going to be to use the tools they have? I mean, Trump has so much more leverage over Putin than he did 4 years ago, economically, militarily. He's got a very strong U.S. economy. He's got a Congress that is overwhelmingly pro-Ukraine, pro-transatlantic. And so he can do a lot. He can open up the gates. He can tell Putin, say, look, I'm going to give the Ukrainians every damn thing they want. General Kellogg said the other day that on a scale of 1 to 10, we were only at a 3 in terms of sanctions that have been employed against Russia. So, and then of course, Trump has the ability, working with the Saudis in particular, to cause oil and gas prices around the world to fluctuate in a way that would cause enormous additional damage to the Russians. So he has a lot of tools, and I think he certainly does not want to be seen as the loser or the weak guy in this situation. So we'll see if he uses the advantages that he has. I certainly hope he does. And I would encourage you not to use peacekeeping force as the name, and I don't think that's what they'll be called, because there has to be a peace to keep, and there is not yet. This is a force that will go in, I believe, before the actual full up negotiations about the long-term resolution of the conflict take place. So it has to be a force that is capable of deterrence against Russian forces. So it has to be joint air, land, sea, special forces, cyber capabilities. It has to have long-range precision strike capability. It has to have drone and counter-drone capabilities. We have to assume that they will be attacked from the air. If they don't come in with these things, then in fact they will be tested in the first hour by the Russian side, because the Russians will remember how pathetic we were by sending just observers from the OSCE, brave women and men of the OSCE who were there to be observers, but had no capability at all to compel compliance. This is not going to be 10,000 dudes in blue helmets and flip-flops out there. This needs to be a combat force, the size of which will be determined once we know exactly what their mission is going to be. The U.S. contribution to this, I suspect, probably initially includes the enablers that we can provide that European armies or countries can't provide, at least not in sufficient quantity. To me, the better model is the I-4 that went into Bosnia in 95. In terms for comparison, where for months you had the supreme headquarters of NATO at SHAPE in Mons, Belgium. The leadership there was working hand in hand with the negotiators, the diplomats that were trying to hammer out the Dayton, what became known as the Dayton Peace Accord, so that all the tasks and agreements in the Dayton Peace Accord were militarily feasible. This is a very important part of this. And then, of course, this force trained very hard, thoroughly, to do the task of separating Bosniaks from Serbs from Croatians. And they had rules of engagement completely different from the preceding UNPROFOR, United Nations Protection Force, that was a failure. Even though most of the countries were the same countries, you had a different structure, different mission, different rules of engagement. And I think this is probably a good model for what we'll see going into Ukraine. Well, certainly it's to our detriment, the detriment of the United States, that Article 5 of the Washington Treaty is even a question. That lessens American influence in Europe. And that does raise the concerns that you correctly have just outlined. But there also is a need for or value in something like the Joint Expeditionary Force, or some version of it that can do things that can't be vetoed by, say, Hungary or Slovakia, for example, or any other country that might want to veto something. So countries that are already trained, who have worked together, common standards, et cetera, and that have a little bit more political flexibility, if you will, I see value in that. And I could imagine that the force that goes into Ukraine, if and when that decision is finally made, could be something like the Jeff plus Poland, for example, or countries that make up the Jeff. Uh, that seems to have merit. Now, um, but we have to be clear before you start talking about a force, the size of force, the type of force, who's in it. The most important thing to be done first is, what is their mission? What is the purpose? What are they supposed to accomplish? Are they a reaction force, or are they going to be in the middle in a zone of separation? I mean, that will dictate the size and capabilities that are required, but they have to have a clear mission. You have to have a clear chain of command, and they have to have very strong rules of engagement that would allow them to use force to immediately, the first time the Russians send over a drone or start probing around violating the agreement, they need to get punched in the nose immediately. And so this force has to have those kinds of rules of engagement. You're right that the Russians have not demonstrated any real interest in peace. They have no interest in doing anything with Ukraine as a sovereign state. Um, but I think, unlike the Minsk 1 and 2, which were catastrophic failures, because you did not have anything to compel the Russians to live up to the agreement. Instead, what we're going to see, I believe, what's in the works is a force, not a peacekeeping force. That would be the wrong name for it, but something more of an implementation force, similar perhaps to what we sent into Bosnia in 1995 to implement the Dayton Peace Accord, a real combat force capable of deterring Russia from making from violating whatever the agreements are. So in other words, this is going to be imposed as a result. Now, I don't know for sure how this works out, but I sort of see it in three kind of phases, and this is going to be over many months. This is not something that's going to happen days, weeks, for sure, not even in 100 days, not the full thing. We're in phase one right now, which is sort of the preparation, where everybody's kind of feeling around, seeing what's possible. You've got the a U.S. and Russian delegation meeting in Saudi Arabia this week. You've got the French president hosting an emergency summit of European leaders in Paris today. You've got General Kellogg, the American envoy to Ukraine, is there in Brussels today and going to Ukraine tomorrow. So all these kind of things are happening, and nations are starting to think about how would they do this? So that's the preparation phase. Phase two will be a ceasefire of some sort, that will require a very strong, capable force, as I've described, that would be European led, but would be enabled by the U.S. most likely. And then the third phase would be the actual negotiations about much more than just a line across Ukraine, but the whole arrangement, and it would include things about Ukraine's future. I'm going to be disappointed no matter what, because it's going to stop short of full restoration of Ukrainian sovereignty, but at least I think it will include recognition of Ukrainian sovereignty. And it will not include, or we're not going to hear a statement that absolutely Ukraine is coming into NATO, but I think it's some clarity on what was said, that NATO membership is not on the table. In hindsight, that actually is a good thing to say, because you don't want to somehow keep it in negotiations where the Russians have anything to say about whether or not Ukraine comes in. So keep that separate. First, I don't accept the notion that the Trump administration plans to say, "All right, we're tired of, babysitting you guys and providing all your security. So good luck, you're on your own," because that would be a massive, catastrophic, self-inflicted wound on the United States. Uh, no matter how much European countries may invest in their own defense, the fact is that European prosperity is key to American prosperity. Europe as a bloc is our biggest trading partner. So it's in our own interest that Europe is prosperous, which means it needs to be stable and secure. So I don't envision the administration just saying, all right, we're out of here, because there are literally hundreds of thousands of Americans that live in Europe, gazillions of dollars of business relationships with European countries. And so they're not going to abandon that. I can envision probably a reduction in the amount of money that's available for rotational U.S. forces that are here since 2016, actually. So I can see that coming. I don't like it, but I can see that coming. But I think that the administration, like every U.S. administration since Truman, has complained about Europeans not investing enough in their own defense and carrying a fair share of the burden. But the Trump administration will use tools to inflict pain on countries versus abandoning it. So every now and then you hear that they're going to pull out of NATO. I don't think so. I think he would rather use tariffs or other tools to put pressure on governments to do more. And of course, no European country should increase its spending because they're worried about getting yelled at by the American president. They should all be doing this because of their responsibility to the security of their own citizens. I can feel that improving a little bit. Well, three things come to mind immediately. Number one, the importance of having allies and partners. That no country, not the United States, nobody can achieve its strategic objectives or protect its strategic interests alone. And that is an underlying part of this entire situation we're in now, the need to work with other countries. The second thing, of course, is a reminder that war is a test of will and a test of logistics at every level, at the tactical level, operational level, and strategic level. And then finally, the responsibility of our civilian leaders to clearly identify the strategic objective. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? That if that's not clear, then it's very difficult to develop the necessary policies to achieve whatever it is we're trying to achieve. So on the Russian side, they clearly have no interest in actually negotiating with Ukraine. They don't want to do anything that gives Ukraine a sort of legitimacy or credibility as a sovereign state. And despite the things that President Trump has said about Putin, that he really is concerned about all the dying, nobody really believes that Putin is concerned about anybody dying except maybe himself, and that they have not stepped away from their stated objective of the destruction of Ukraine as a state and the idea of Ukraine as a state. So that has not changed. On the other side, it was maddening for me that the Biden administration never did clearly identify a strategic outcome and never could say they wanted Ukraine to win. Instead, you could only deduce that the interest of the Biden administration was in preventing Ukraine from losing, preventing Russia from winning, but avoiding escalation to something else. That was it. And so you end up where we are exactly today. I actually think, after having thought about this over the last few days at the Munich Security Conference, that as chaotic and incoherent as it appears, there is more of a framework from the Trump administration. Even if I don't agree with it, it's becoming clear than what we saw from the Biden administration. I have heard from others that have inside knowledge there that there's a growing discontent into because of the inflation, raising prices inside Russia. People are finally starting to complain about the number of casualties. Even inside Russia, there has to be some sort of sense of things are not going well and as expected. And so, I'm reluctant to because I've been wrong several times on my estimates of when things might happen or how long could something last. But, it does seem that this year, 2025, is a potentially one of those years where, like, can they continue at the same level? especially if we don't do something to change the dynamic, the external dynamics, can the Russians really continue what they're doing with this propped up economy? I I'm skeptical. Parts of it could be adopted by us, but I mean, you're describing a situation, and by the way, I'm envious of it. I am impressed with it, but they are in there, they're fighting inside their own country. I mean, they're literally fighting for their life. And so that's a different sort of a scenario than when you're talking about how can we do this in UK or Germany or the US for something that we're going to do on a different continent or that we would employ in the Middle East or whatever. So it's the scale aspect of it as well. So yes, the Ukrainians are coming up with incredible solutions for where they're doing it. I'd be interested. Maybe you'll learn a lot next week when you're in Ukraine and have the chance to talk to people. How do they share inside Ukrainian forces if the uh, Second Brigade has developed a great technique for doing a certain thing? How do they get that from what they've learned in Kursk down to Pokrovsk? Is there a mechanism inside? I think the British Army and the U.S. Army are very good at this. When we found something that worked, it got blasted out, and it also was sent to our training base so that units could immediately start training on the new thing before they deployed. But it would require addressing the various laws and policies that govern procurement and production. I mean, it's not just a matter of a commander saying, all right, troops, we're going to be the most innovative battalion, brigade, division in the U.S. Army or the British Army. Yes, sir. Okay, get at it. And somewhere, somebody's got to buy the stuff. You have to procure. And of course, there are, for good reason, plenty of rules and regulations about where the money goes, accountability. And then while something looks like a great idea for this particular situation, is it scalable that we can use everywhere? Or can it be done safely? How do you train with it? I mean, I'm not making excuses. These are the facts that govern how we do stuff. And of course, the Congress, not one penny comes to the Department of Defense without the Congress authorizing and appropriating it. And so we joke that in the Pentagon has a board of directors with 535 members. So these are the kind of things, and obviously it'd be the same in UK, and it'll be the same in any European country that's part of the European Union. So if you want to be innovative, it's not just about do we have enough smart young people that can put shit together. It's also the rules that would have to be addressed, at least to get any sort of scale. Some leaders are going to have to rise to the challenge across Europe. And you do see some people in some countries that have stepped up where you can see the possibility of not everybody's just going to get roll over for Trump or for Putin or for Xi. Often these are from the very small Baltic countries, for example. But I'm impressed with Alexander Stubb of Finland. This guy, he is not confused about the threats and responsibilities. And they demonstrated that by seizing this vessel, the Eagle S, that was dragging their anchor across the Baltic Sea. The Finns go out and seize the vessel. I think more and more people will start feeling confident that they have to do the same sort of thing. Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, she's got some brass. I mean, really strong, clear messages. We have an election here in Germany coming up in just a few weeks that will see a likely much stronger CDU-led government with Friedrich Merz as the Bundeskanzler. Donald Tusk in Poland. It feels almost like the center of gravity of power in Europe is shifting east and north. And these are people that are not confused about Russia as the threat. And I have to say also that former Prime Minister Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, he's already doing better than I had anticipated. So um, all is not lost, even though the U.S. government, the one that's coming in, is going to be problematic, and hopefully we'll see them um, understand better what they're going to do in the coming months. I have to say the UK seems to be on the sideline. You know, each of us has our own internal issues, but I don't feel that oomph coming from UK. Macron in France, has huge challenges of his own from the his opposition. So this is others are going to have to step up. I think that's I don't know that I agree with the level of drama that you just injected into that. Um, the United States is not at 5% right now. So, I mean, that would require us to do more as well. I do think you're right that he sees NATO as some sort of protection racket. They're not paying their due, they're paying their share. They be in Germany or Canada or other countries. Um, and every president since Truman has complained that our European allies have not invested enough in their own defense. So that's not new. But the number, I mean, during the height of the Cold War, Germany was at between 3.5 and 4% GDP. So these numbers um, are not unheard of in the past. And I think most people, if they believe that there is a threat, if the leadership speaks and say, hey, look, we have to invest in defense because here's what's at stake. This is what's at risk. And I think if they can articulate that to the public, enough people will say, God damn, okay, but yes, we'll have to do that. I have to tell you, I don't see any decrease in the number of people here in Europe that go to Mallorca for holiday or go to their ski holidays or drive around in big nice cars. I mean, I see no decrease in any of that. So um, there is a lot of room for people to be required to pay more for defense, as well as the other things that governments are supposed to provide, infrastructure, et cetera. But it will require leaders saying, let me tell you why we have to do this. And then that's always been the case. Well, that's right. And his sense of winning is based on whether or not he thinks that Ukraine will get the support it's getting now from the West. And I think if if he believes that Trump is more interested in just getting a negotiated outcome so that they can turn away and focus on other things, then I think he'll wait us out on that. So yes, I think he probably feels like he's in a good spot until he's not. And all the language that has come out of Trump and the Trump team over the last few months points exactly towards that. I mean, the bizarre statements last week about Greenland and Canada and Panama. I mean, they must have been almost in disbelief in the Kremlin and in Beijing that here's the American president-elect using the same kind of language, and then having people come out to sort of justify it. Well, Greenland has got so much mineral wealth; it's really important. Like, unbelievable. Um, so I do have fear. I used to kind of think, oh, come on, this is just Trump being Trump, blah, blah, blah. But enough other people now have come out explaining it like, holy shit, they're having deep conversations and looking at maps and thinking about this. And he sends his son to Greenland and this incredible that they would even be having these sort of conversations. And there was an excellent Wall Street Journal article that came out right after that press conference, and it kind of describes the the outlines of what a Trump foreign policy might be. And it's based on power and that sort of sphere of influence versus the international rules-based order, in which the United States has benefited more than any other country on the planet. And yet he talks about it as if we're getting screwed over by everybody benefiting from our benevolence and strong defense. There is a lot of merit to that. That there is a sense that other countries have uh, taken advantage of American investment in defense so that they didn't have to. Every president has complained about that since Truman, but nobody has benefited more from this entire arrangement than the United States. And now he's going to, dump over the apple cart, and I worry about that, because then the Chinese will say, okay, good. We'll take what we want, you have what you want. They're making arguments that in terms of the why, why these places matter. It's like, yeah, of course you do. But it's the how that is so concerning. I mean, we already have a base on Greenland, thanks to, with the permission, obviously, of the Danish government and the people of the government of Greenland. Um, Not a lot of people are begging to be assigned there, as you can imagine, but nonetheless, we have had that since the Second World War. Um, so if we're concerned for security reasons, let's ask, can we grow the size of that base? Can we put more assets there, Air Force, Navy, etc.? We have invigorated our presence in Iceland. You remember from the Cold War days, the famous GI-UK gap, Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, from which the alliance would watch and monitor Soviet submarines coming down from the Arctic down into the North Atlantic. So this is becoming important again. Denmark has reinvigorated or restarted their radar stations in Faroe Islands for the same reason. Um, and if it's about access to wealth, okay, then there's ways to do that. And I think Greenland has said they're open for business. Uh, Canada, while not a huge population, is a gigantic country with endless amounts of wealth. And it's terrible that they have been such a poor investor in defense. And so I have no problem with the U.S. government putting pressure on our Canadian neighbors, say, hey, look, you're part of the Atlantic and Pacific as well, just like us, and you're the biggest Arctic country next to Russia, maybe. So do more, or help us protect what we care about. But to threaten them and talk about them as a 51st state, and all of these things, erode the cohesion of the alliance. That it makes people question, like, what the hell? I mean, the cohesion inside NATO, despite the arguments we all have with each other all the time on different policy things, that cohesion of NATO was always the secret sauce. And I think that's at risk. He has not changed his war aims, despite the casualties, despite their inability to achieve what they set out to achieve. And in fact, I think Putin is in a weaker position now than he was a year ago. Not only because of the casualties and the losses and the damage to their economy, the loss of Assad in Syria. I mean, that was as clear a demonstration as we're going to see of Russia's weakened position, that they could not save their ally in Syria. And now they're losing their Navy base in Tartus and other their air bases. You saw the picture last week of the Russian submarines sailing out towards Gibraltar because it couldn't stay in Syria. I mean, this is incredible. All of these are indicators of Putin's weakening, in my view. So But yet, despite that, they have not changed their war aims, and I think he probably can't change his war aims, um, and still stay in power, not in a significant, meaningful way. Of course, it's not our responsibility to keep him in his job. It ought to, we prefer the opposite. Um, but I think as long as he believes that the U.S., the UK, and the rest of Europe will turn their back or are happy to let, just for the sake of peace, some kind of negotiated outcome where the fighting stops, then I think he will continue doing what he's doing. Um, because again, he doesn't care about casualties. But I think if he's made to understand that he's not going to be able to keep Crimea, or he's not going to be able to keep this 20% of Ukraine that he's taken, that we are committed, then I think things change. Two or three things there, Jonathan. First of all, it is the responsibility of the civilian authorities and the top military leadership to make sure you have the best possible leaders at every level in combat. And after really 11 years of war, but specifically after the last 3 years, they can see who out there are the best young tactical leaders at company, battalion, brigade level. I mean, they've had years to demonstrate capability. And so very seldom does an army end the war with the same leaders that they had at the beginning because of a variety of reasons. And I think it will be appropriate for General Sarsky and the leadership to use this opportunity to weed out those who are not um, uh, adaptive enough and who are not competent in combat. Um, but there also is a requirement for training and education to continue even while you are at war. The training of officers at entry level up through brigade command has to continue even while you're at war, which means you also have to have some quality officers as part of the instruction, the faculty, if you will. So this is a commitment that the Ukrainians have got to make to what we call the institutional army, the part of the army that the overhead for training, educating, recruiting, et cetera. Um, I think that that look, there's no way I can say this that it's not going to sound kind of harsh or callous, but every soldier is going to complain about leadership, when you're in a really crappy situation. So I always have to take this with just a little bit of salt. The complaints that there's still a Soviet mindset. I mean, there are very, very, very few officers in Ukrainian armed forces that were around when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. So there aren't many that would have been trained in Soviet schools, only those guys who are at the very top level. Having said that, I do think that you probably have some leaders that are in that mindset. I spoke with a friend who is has a responsibility to help train officers. And this person told me that there still are a lot of families that are reluctant to send their son or daughter to the army because they still see it as a Soviet style prison army. Um, and they're worried that their son or daughter would be wasted, sent to the front without proper training and equipment, et cetera. So there is that. The Ukrainians, I think, are unsurpassed in terms of creativity and innovation and getting new technologies into the fight. Their ability to do it at the scale necessary to have the sort of real effect that they need is not there yet. And this is where, of course, we should be helping in developing or providing what's needed to increase the scale of these innovations. I have been impressed with what they've done with electronic warfare. I think this is part of how they were able to achieve the surprise that they did back in August, And here again, despite Russia presumably having thousands of drones in the area, that Ukraine could still build up forces right under the noses of the Russians and launch these attacks without being hammered by Russian artillery or Russian air power. So I hope that we are learning how the Ukrainians are doing this, because certainly we've never, in my experience, have ever had that kind of quality and quantity of electronic warfare, jamming, and so on. It's the strategic objective of wanting Russia to lose, of wanting Ukraine to win. I mean, that's what has you have to get the objective right, and then you can develop the policies that are implemented to achieve the objective. And we've gone about it backwards now over the last few years with regards to Ukraine. And by the way, also in Afghanistan, we didn't have a clearly defined strategic objective in Afghanistan for 19 out of 20 years. So I do think that the Russian economy is in deep trouble. I've seen what you've done here recently, and a lot of other people are talking more and more about Russian economic troubles, how things are being propped up artificially. If we had shut down the shadow fleet earlier, that would have prevented Russia from getting billions of euro that they need desperately to keep their war effort going. So finally, the Biden administration putting sanctions on something like 200 vessels. Why now? It's 3 years late, but it's never too late to start doing this. And again, this is more leverage for Trump. He can leave these things in place, or he can increase the pressure. I think Trump's motivation will be based on real hard power, and what he and his team see as best advantage for the United States, even if it improves or raises opportunity for American oil companies, for example. I think this is all part of the mix. It certainly would be a power that he would have and leverage that he would have over China and India also, if he can shut down that, if he wants to. That's the problem. I don't know what they really want to do, but I do hope that they will use these economic tools to help crush the Russian government that's in power now, not only to help Ukraine win, but Russia's, and you know Russia so much better than I do, but I mean, they're never going to change until they're defeated. If they're not defeated, Putin will be replaced by another Putin. Things like geographical restrictions on certain type weapons, those are policy decisions that the Biden administration made to avoid escalation, but they were not tethered to any strategic objective like helping Ukraine win. I mean, that was always, despite all the good intentions of many people in the Biden administration, they never clearly identified an objective of, we want Ukraine to win because it's in our interest, not because we like Ukrainians or out of charity, but because it's in our interest for them to defeat Russia, because that will help deter China. The Chinese will see, my goodness, the West really does have the political will and the capacity to do all this. So for the Trump administration, I don't think even he knows exactly what the strategic outcome should be, or that he wants. But I do have a sense that there's a growing realization inside the Trump team that he will have enormous leverage over Vladimir Putin that he did not have 8 years ago. I mean, Trump is coming in, he's inheriting a very good, strong U.S. economy. Contrary to what they say, the facts are he's inheriting a good, strong economy. He's at the peak of his political power. He's got a willing and compliant Congress, I think, at least initially. And so Trump could do several things, like leaving in place the recent changes by the Biden administration about using ATACMS wherever they want, without having to do or say anything. And they can communicate to the Kremlin that, look, you're going to have to negotiate here. You're going to have to do some things, or we're just going to let these keep going. even better, there's another $2 billion worth of aid that had already been approved and authorized by the Congress that the Biden administration did not get out the door in time. That's on the table. And so Trump doesn't have to lift a finger, and that's still $2 billion worth of stuff that's in the pipeline. And so these are the kind of things that he can tell the Russians that this is all going to happen unless you are a reliable negotiating partner. Of course, this could be wishful thinking on my part, but I believe that I think I have a slightly higher bit of optimism about what the Trump team will do than I did even 3 or 4 months ago. I think it's incredible that 6 months after the original Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Kursk direction, the Russians have still not been able to eliminate that bridgehead. Even though Putin has, I think, issued two different timelines, like get this done by 1 October or by 1 January, and they've been unable to do that. And I think the fact that the Ukrainians were able to launch a second phase here a couple of weeks ago, to which you just referenced, highlights the fact that Russia still does not have a joined up command structure, seemingly, that's responsible for what's happening in Kursk. I think there's some overlap between FSB and General Staff. And so you don't have I think, a clear picture. The Russians don't have a clear picture of what's going on inside that bridgehead and have not been able to form a concerted, concentrated effort to eliminate it. I mean, my gosh, they would seemingly have plenty of resources to do all of that. So I think these are the typically indicators of command structures that are not coherent. That's one of the things that I think about. Strategically, of course, this continues to be a problem for the Kremlin, because if the Trump administration is able to get people to agree to come to some sort of negotiations, this is problematic for the Kremlin, since they have said all along that the start point for negotiations will be what they already control inside Ukraine. Well, if that's the case, Ukrainians have control inside Russia. I think that will be a problem. And then finally, at the operational level, Russia is having to divert resources of different types to deal with this bridgehead that perhaps they would prefer to use elsewhere. Yeah, that's exactly what they have in mind. And that's also, by the way, a widely supported approach by most European leaders, that this is not normal times, this is emergency. And while there are some voices that have understandable reluctance about what are the knock-on effects regarding the Middle East, et cetera, if they might pull their money out of European banks because they're worried about it happening to them. The fact is, 300 billion, that is a lot of money to help pay for not only Ukrainian long-term security, but also reconstruction. That seems to me a pretty doggone good investment. And obviously that would be very, very painful for the Russians. But the Russians, until they're defeated, until they actually feel real consequences, they're never going to change. After Putin is going to be another Putin. So to me, this is a gigantic no-brainer. When you think about even Trump, he has to be able to sell this to his own voters, to keep the Congress on side. And so if he can say, look, we've helped bring about an end to the fighting, and we're not even paying for it. The Ukrainians are paying for it. I mean, you remember how he talked about, and of course it never worked out, how he was going to get the Mexicans to pay for building the wall. That never happened. But this to me, and I'm only saying this to try and understand it, not defend it. That this seems how he might try to convey to the U.S., to his own voters and taxpayers, this is not going to cost us. We're going to make money off of this. That feels yucky to me to even have to say that, but this is not a normal time, and I think if Europeans feel uneasy about it, okay, well then roll your sleeves up and get in there and do something instead of sitting on the side and moralizing about how terrible Trump is or how bad the Russians are, but yet you're not actually doing anything. The combined economies of Europe dwarfs the economy of Russia. So you can whinge about, oh, the U.S. is terrible. Do something about it, because at the end of the day, if Ukraine fails, you're going to have millions, millions with an M, more Ukrainian refugees pouring into Germany, pouring into Poland, pouring across Europe, continued disruption of food and energy supplies, which means higher prices for all across Europe, and the very real threat that Russia will do exactly what they said would do, which is to continue the conflict against a NATO country within the next 3-4 years. You and your listeners will have already spotted that I'm not an economist, but let me offer 2 or 3 things here. And of course, Germany has an election 6 days from now, on the 23rd of February. Most people assume that the Christian Democrats will get the most votes and that they will have the responsibility to lead to form a new coalition. We don't know if it'll be CDU and the SPD, which is Scholz's party, or if it'll be CDU and Greens, or a three-way coalition, which is the least desirable, but also that's a possibility. So at least with the CDU in the lead, and based on what Mr. Meritz has said in the past, I think we'll see a significant increase in German willingness to literally do more. Now, this 5% number is, I mean, the U.S. is not at 5%. And I don't think we can get there, or I don't think we want to actually get there. But the point is, it doesn't matter what the percentage is. You can't put a big sign on your border and say, hey, we're 2%, you can't invade us, or we're 3%. That's not going to cause a Russian tank regiment to turn around and go back. It's about having real capability. The fact is, the polls are almost at 5% now. They're not confused about the threat, and they're making the choices. In the Cold War, Germany was up around 4.2%. So, I mean, they can do it. And, where I live here in Germany, beautiful part of Germany, there's been no decrease in the number of people going on ski vacations down to Kitzbühel or Wengen or to Central Pay. I mean, so you're right. You can't increase spending unless you're willing to cut other places or raise taxes or find some means to do what needs to be done. And then in the UK's case, I wonder how many Brits appreciate the amount of budget that goes to maintaining a modern, ready nuclear force. It's a gigantic portion of the defense budget, which means that all the other parts of the UK's great military is underfunded. So these are choices that governments have to make.
A final word from our partners, the makers of Kyiv of Mine. All 3 films are now available to watch for free on YouTube. Please check out the links to the dedicated website, which tells you more about the film, its subjects, and the filmmakers. Also in the description is a link to the YouTube channel where you can watch the films now. Do let us know in the comments what you think of them and if they inspire you as much as they have inspired me.